Joanna. I wrote the crime disad, and I just wanted to explain to you how this disad works and how you can answer it if you hit at something similar at Long Beach. So, the disad first on the disad itself. The first card is a uniqueness card. So, basically, it says that crime is low right now. There are overall trends that prove that it is like the lowest right now than it has been in decades, and gives you like historical trends. So basically, uniqueness in general, or this kind of uniqueness card, is a description of the status quo. And this kind of card is important because it gives you a reason as to why the impact isn't happening right now. If your opponent says this impact would have happened already, this is the specific card that you should point to because it's saying crime is low now, which is why the impacts with like that need high crime aren't happening right now, and why you increasing crime will make it like net worse. Now onto the second card, it says that conscription increases violence and crime. This is the link card, and it gives you like reasons as to why what the AF does specifically will increase crime, or why the disad applies to their AF. Now it gives you like a couple of warrants. It says that conscription will deter criminal behavior by keeping them like isolated from society, and also like there's empirical proof as to why or how like conscripts will commit crimes like when they're off duty, and also commit like social crimes because they're literally taken away from their future like labor market opportunities to serve, and they're kind of forced to do this. And also they're like overexposed to things like violence and warfare as well as weapons during like this kind of like during wartime and being in the army, which will kind of increase aggression and will inevitably lead to crime. Now, the third card is like similar to the second one, right? It's the same author. It gives you the same thesis. This card is specifically important though because it gives you a study, right? It gives you a study that shows you how like crime will increase when you enact conscription. This is good for evidence comparison, right? If they have evidence saying that the AF doesn't increase crime, then you obviously have to prove why your evidence is better, and why like therefore your claims are probably more true. So first is author quals, right? This is kind of a cheap shot, but also it's also compelling. There are authors. The authors that wrote both of these cards are professors that study specifically on labor economics, and are the ones that have studies on why conscript armies will lead to more crime. This means that they have more expertise on the specific topic, and this kind of gives the judge a reason why they should believe these cards more than your opponent's cards. The second one is recency. Both these cards were written in 2016, which is pretty recent, especially for the study, and this is important because it takes into account specific situations that are happening right now, rather than like what happened a long time ago, which might like affect their outcomes. Like for example, if this card was written 10 years ago, obviously the economy was different and like different situations were different, which means that it might not apply to right now. But because this card is recent, that means right now if you enact conscription, it will still increase crime, and because it takes into account like our current situation. Now the Falk card, the fourth card, is the internal link. An internal link is what connects the link and kind of the first part of the disad to the impact, or why the disad matters. It says that low crime is needed to maintain soft power, implying that when the AF increases crime, it will kill soft power. So first, let's define soft power. It's non-military influence and control over other countries. This card says that soft power will be like really beneficial and have policy payoff, right? It says that the U.S. can increase effectiveness of its military forces and make the world safe for soft power, but this will not work if there are high rates of crime in the U.S., right? This makes sense. Other countries obviously need to see the U.S. as a strong and favorable like power or ally in order for them to listen to us, or in order for us to have influence. And obviously high rates of crime and violence and aggression from like citizens within our country will make us look bad and like less trustworthy, and people will stop listening to us. And why is soft power so important? That's the fifth card. That's the Lagones 11 card, which is the impact. Why the disad matters. Why does the increase in crime lead to a bigger impact, or why does this outweigh case? So the Lagones 11 card is a general impact card. It gives you a list of different things that soft power is important in, like solving for terrorism, disease, pro-life, alliances, and solving for genocide. And this is the kind of general impact card. There are specific ones below, which I will explain later, but basically this impact card is important because it's important to weigh the disad against case. And this is important because even if you lose a tiny part of case, it doesn't matter because you can make the argument that the disad comes first. For example, solving for terrorism comes first, or solving for existential scenarios come first for obvious reasons, right? But you have to point them out. So things like magnitude or scope is what you should probably go for under this card, because it's saying that we solve for existential scenarios and that they don't, right? That means we are solving for the lives of every single person or we're solving for we're solving for extinction and every single person on Earth, which means that even if the F solves for one tiny thing that they talk about, obviously solving for extinction outweighs. Now, going on to the specific impacts. First is terrorism. That's the 903 card. It says that soft power is a key check on terror, empiricals, right? It gives you empirical evidence or historical proof that soft power has always been needed to check on terrorism and why, hard military power will never work. And you can obviously also weigh under this. Terrorism is important because of things like magnitude, scope, things like time frame, probability, because terrorism is happening, and has happened very frequently and recently. And then the second impact is hegemony. So this one has two cards, which is kind of like a logic chain. So the 990 card says that soft power is key to U.S. hegemony, and hegemony is kind of the influence or control over other countries. And while soft power is specifically non-military influence, what this says is that military influence is important, but in order to have that, you need to have non-military or kind of diplomatic control, which is soft power. And this is only important because of the Khalilzad card, which is that hegemony, or U.S. hegemony specifically, will prevent nuclear proliferation and thus also global nuclear war. And this is really big on things like magnitude and scope, right? You are solving for literally deaths of millions of people, as well as deaths, which is in itself more intense than smaller impacts that aren't death. Going on to the answers. So if you're on AF and your opponent is reading something like the crime disad that I just explained to you, you should probably read 2 out of 4 cards. So the first 3 cards all have the same exact claim. It just has different warrants, which means that you should just pick one based on what you think is most strategic for you personally. So it says all 3 of these first cards say that conscription decreases crime, and therefore we solve for your impacts. Even if increasing crime will lead to killing soft power, which will lead to extinction, it doesn't. We are actually solving for that because the AF will decrease crime, not increase it, which means that the disad doesn't apply. So first, the Nubirta 12 card. It gives you a study that says that conscription reduces crime. And what's kind of good about this card is that it uses official data from the government of convicts and soldiers, and also looks at both volunteer and conscript army, which means that there's a direct comparison between the world of the affirmative and the world of the negative. It says that even with a volunteer army, it definitely doesn't decrease crime as much as the AF conscription army does, which means that the AF is net better for this kind of disad chain, even if they do defend that. Now, the second turn is gives you different kinds of warrants. It gives you a study, but it also gives you analytical warrants. So basically, it gives you a study that looks at different soldiers and how crime does not increase from conscription or universal military service, but rather decreases, and gives you logical reasons as to why this is true, right? It says that when people are forced to go into these kind of specific programs, they learn discipline and they're less likely to lash out with criminal behavior. Okay, so For the third turn, it also says that compulsory national service decreases crime. But I think this one is particularly strategic, the Kwong 16 card, because it looks at multiple different programs that have already happened and says that it historically there is proof that conscript armies decrease crime, right? It looks at different programs that have already happened, which is really compelling because that means there's proof that it happens. It's not just looking at a study predicting the future, but rather looking back on what actually happens with current like the given situations and like different material like material reality rather than like future theorizing or future predictions. So just choose one of those three, and that would be good for like because it still defends the same claim. It's just what you think is most strategic. Now the last card is a little different. It says no link. It's the London 56 card. It says that national service doesn't affect crime levels, right? That means that's just basically you saying that the AF doesn't like kind of link into the disad and doesn't actually increase crime. And it says that conscript armies have nothing to do with crime at all, which means that the disad like isn't relevant. It gives you a study of like conscript armies and like soldiers specifically serving in them, and how other factors like age, as well as like socioeconomic backgrounds, were definitely more important and actually the main factors in like leading to crime, and not whether the army was conscript or volunteer. So that's the end of the presentation. I hope it was helpful, and good luck at Long Beach.